So welcome everybody. As you know, I am Mrs. Waters. I handle the programming for juniors and seniors, and I'm one of the EOF counselors. Ms. Hallman is the director of the Career Center, and so she will be providing you with information concerning graduate exams, schools, costs, all the great questions that you guys ask us, and we continue to refer you to the Career Center. So Ms. Hallman, the floor is yours, your co-host.
Thank you. And thank you for having me speak today. I hope everyone's doing all right. Can't wait till we get back to campus, whenever that is, hopefully more in the fall, so we actually get to see everyone in person. Yes, I am the Assistant Dean Director of the Career Center. Part of our 3 prongs of services is that we do graduate school advising. So have been, doing graduate school advising for years in the Career Center. I've been asked to talk specifically about graduate school exams. We do graduate school advising, so if you need any assistance after this program, mostly on other parts of applying to graduate school, then please feel free to make an appointment with us. We do have hours available. Our hours are really the same as they've always been, pre-virtual. So we're available for appointments Mondays and Thursdays from 8:30 till 6, and from Tuesday, Wednesday, and Fridays, 8:30 to 4:30. Primarily, our appointments are virtual, either through WebEx, Zoom, or over the phone. I'm the only career counselor who is doing in-person appointments, and I mostly work with the STEM majors, and so there is availability for STEM majors to make in-person appointments if necessary on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Okay. We also have a lot of information about applying to graduate school on our website, and at the end of this presentation, I will jump over to the website to show you where you can find some of this additional information. Lots of resources, lots of experience in working with students applying to graduate school. So diving in, actually what I would like to do, Caroline, are the students able to chat? Up here on mute. You're on mute.
Yes, the chat is open. So if I see any questions, I can read them to you.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'll use the chat right now to do kind of a quick poll.
There you go.
So you're here. So I'm assuming you're thinking about going on to graduate school. If everyone could type in the chat what type of graduate program they're considering, whether it's a master's degree, the degree, and the subject area. I'll give you 5 seconds to type fast. Whoa, that was fast. Okay, so we have art education, social work, PT, physical therapy, social work. Oh my goodness. Okay, thank you. A lot of social work. But this actually gives me a good idea of what programs really to kind of concentrate on and those that might not be as important. And I guess I'll save the best for last because I don't want the social work students to jump out, but there's a few more: health sciences, psychology, or criminal justice. Okay. So looking at this initially, it looks like the first exam that I'm going to cover is probably the most relevant to all of you here today. We can just skip the rest of them. I'll quickly go over the rest of them, but it looks like most of the programs. Now, Desiree, you said health sciences. are you looking at a graduate degree in that or a graduate degree in a specific area of health? You want to type that? Oh, okay, nursing. All right, great. Okay. Well, one last question. Yes, that's, you just answered it. Never mind. The accelerated program. Okay, so the first exam that I'm going to talk about is the graduate records exam. And you're all here, so I probably am not breaking the news to you, but yes, most graduate programs do require a standardized test, just like undergrad does. The biggest difference is where when you were applying for your bachelor's degree, applying to Rutgers-Camden, you may have been required to take either the SAT or the ACT, and that's pretty much the only two exams. And they're interchangeable. You know, universities will take one or the other. At the graduate level, it gets a lot more complicated than that. And so every graduate program can have their own type of standardized test that they require. And there are many more than two. However, I did want to start with the GRE, and it's the most logical place to start because the GRE, the graduate records exam, is the most commonly required standardized test for graduate schools. And it is going to be required for, if you think of our College of Arts and Sciences, just about, at the graduate level or our graduate school at Rutgers-Camden. Trying to think of a program in the College of Arts and Sciences graduate program that doesn't require the GRE. And I don't think there are. So it would be required from the sciences to the humanities, to the social sciences. So it covers all of those areas. It also covers some health professions programs. So I think somebody was interested in physical therapy. Physical therapy programs require GRE. They don't require any other specialized standardized test, just the GRE. If anyone's interested in veterinary school, veterinary programs only require the GRE. So, and it is also the exam most like the SAT. Now, some of you may have taken the ACT to come into Rutgers-Camden, or if you transferred in from a community college, you may not have had to take a standardized test to get into the community college or then to transfer to Rutgers-Camden. But the GRE in its content is most similar to the SAT. So, and I will show you a breakdown of the content. But as this slide says here, it's the most common standardized test. There are two options with the GRE. Everyone who has to take the GRE is going to take the general test. And that's the portion of the exam that is most like the SAT and that we'll talk about as far as the content and scoring. Some graduate programs will require a subject test. The subject test is taken in addition to the general test. The areas that may require a subject test or their subject test in is biology, chemistry, literature and English, math, physics, and psychology. So those are the 7 subject tests that are available. Now, just because, let's say you were interested in a master's degree in psychology, just because there's a subject test for a master's degree in psychology, doesn't mean the programs that you're applying to are going to require it. So one of the big differences between undergraduate and graduate school applications is that every program can ask for something a little bit different. So if you're applying to a master's degree in psychology, you might find that you're looking at 10 schools and 3 of them want you to take the subject test and 7 of them just want the general test. So you have to do a lot of research in applying to graduate schools. So you might decide that you want to go to a program, but you then have to develop a list of of schools and programs that you are interested in, and then find out what each individual program's requirements are. And also remember, when, again, a big difference between undergrad and grad is when you are applying to undergrad, you're applying to the whole university in general, pretty much, unless you were applying to the nursing school or the School of Business. When you're applying to graduate school, you have to remember that you're really applying to that academic program. Whereas when you applied to undergrad, your application went to the admissions office, and really the admissions department made the decision whether you were admitted or not. At the graduate level, your application is going to go to an admissions department, and they're really there to make sure maybe you meet the minimum standards or that your application is complete. Then they send your application to each individual graduate program, and the staff and faculty in that program make the decision at the program level whether you're admitted or not. So as I said, it gets a lot more complicated when you're applying to graduate programs, because you're applying to the program itself, certainly the university as a whole, but then you're applying to that specific program, and each program at a university can have different requirements. Okay, so that's a quick explanation of why some schools might require a subject test, some may not. I don't know if you can read the small print there, but as far as how do you register, where do you take the exam? I do have a website, and I will share this PowerPoint with Ms. Waters after we're finished so that she can then send it out to you so that you'll have these links. ETS administers the GRE, and so the website's there. You go online. The great thing about the GRE compared to other standardized tests is the GRE is administered year-round. All times of the year, almost pretty much I was just looking at their calendar, and it's pretty much 7 days a week, all year round that it's administered. So it's fairly easy to and quick to schedule a day that you want to take the exam. Usually, and how you do this is you would go onto the GRE's website, and you would register for the exam. And then when you register, then the next step is that you will pick a site where you want to take the exam. And then you will see a list of sites and the availability, day and time at those sites that you can register for the exam. The exam, as it says, it is computer-based. So if you're going in person to a site, you're going to be sitting at a computer and taking the exam. So you register for the exam. You might have a specific day that you want to take the exam, and that might be a priority. So you can go into the schedule and see where the site is available on a specific day, or you might have a site that you want to go to. And so you would go and find that site location and see when days and times are available. And as far as if you're going to take it on site, let me think, there's definitely a number of sites in Philadelphia where you can take the exam. There's very odd places because it's a testing organization site that you're going to take the exam at. And I believe there was one in Mount Laurel and there was one in Laurel Springs. So think of Laurel. Those were the two closest in South Jersey. Again, one in Laurel Springs and one in Mount Laurel were the testing sites. Otherwise, the majority of the closest testing sites are in Philadelphia. Again, it's pretty easy and quick to schedule an exam once you have decided you want to take it. I usually say you can get in within 2 or 3 weeks to a testing site. The fall is the busiest time for when students take the GRE. So you might have to wait a few more weeks more than 2 or 3 weeks. It might be 3 or 4 weeks before you can get an exam in the fall. So you have to plan ahead for that. But the rest of the time of the year, it's pretty simple. Within a few weeks, you can usually get a day and time and get in to take the exam. Again, up in that fine print, what you're going to see is that the ETS has made because of COVID, has made the GRE available to take at home. And so on their website, they have more information about how that is administered. Again, to take the GRE at home, it is readily available. They have lots of days and times where you can do that. When you are taking it, they are using a Proctor platform. I don't know if any of you have used the Proctor platform at Rutgers-Camden. I know the nursing school was using a Proctor platform to take exams. But that's how they're going to be able to administer the GRE at home because of COVID. I don't know if they're planning on pulling that back at some time. They may have just discovered that this is just another option for students and will keep the at-home option. So if you're concerned about going to a testing site in person at this time, know that there is an at-home option to take the GRE. Okay, and that's the general test. As they say, currently the ETS has no plans to change the GRE subject tests, which are offered in September, October, and April. So the subject tests are not as readily available, and they're only in person for the subject tests at this time. So only the general test is being offered at home, to take it at home. These tests, the GRE is $250 for the general test. There is an extra fee, and I'm actually misgrabbing that information, but there is an extra fee if you have to take a subject test. Okay, and the breakdown of the GRE is, as I said, it is very similar to the SAT. So if you took the SAT, it's going to feel very similar. About 3 hours and 45 minutes plus short breaks. There is quantitative, analytical, verbal, reasoning, and then the unscored areas of the unscored and the research. So those aren't part of your score. And I like to tell students that, number one, yes, there is math on the GRE. That's what I find the students are most concerned about. But it's no higher than college algebra. So you're not going to have Calc 3 on the GRE that you have to study for. What's also interesting with the GRE, because it is used so widely for so many different types of academic programs, that an academic program that you're applying to is going to look at this differently than other programs. So if you're applying to the Rutgers-Camden's master's degree in English, they're not going to be as concerned about the math part of the GRE scores. They're going to be more interested in your verbal reasoning and your analytical writing portion. If you're applying to, our master's in computer science, then the chances are they are more interested in your quantitative reasoning. So when you're researching schools, I always recommend certainly going to websites, but if you can go to open houses, virtual open houses, if you can email faculty or chairs of the graduate programs, do that. Ask questions, because you'll probably want to know, do they take into consideration the entire score, or do they weigh some portions of the exam more than others? And I can tell you, I know, talking to the graduate programs at Rutgers-Camden, each program looks at the scores differently, and they weigh some areas more heavily than other areas of the exam. Again, I know because, years ago, a former director of the English master's degree in English at Rutgers-Camden made sure she told me to tell anyone who's interested in that program to not worry about the math, because what was happening is students were going into the program non-matric. So you can go in and take a couple classes before you had to take the GRE, and they would take a couple classes, but then she said they would disappear. And it's because they were afraid to take the GRE to move forward and to become a matriculated student in the program. So I do like to let you know that depending on the program, some areas scores are going to be weighed heavier than others in this exam. Okay. So I'm talking about scores, a little bit of the score breakdown. The score is it ranges from 260 to 340. And I don't know if you can see this. I'll try to make this bigger. So you can see here, this is a list of a number of different graduate fields and what the average scores are in these fields for the verbal and the quantitative areas. I'm trying to see. So arts and humanities, verbal 156, quantitative 150. And this is just an overall average of students who take these exams. But you can see, like engineering, the verbal is 149, but their quantitative is 160. And that's probably perfectly fine with those programs. Trying to see. Business 154. Now, students always want to know, well, what is a good score? Again, it varies widely. One thing you do want to know is the more competitive the program, the more weight they're going to put on the GRE. The GRE is required for both master's degree programs and PhD or doctorate level program. I can guarantee you if you're applying to a doctorate level program, you want to take this a lot more seriously. They're going to use the scores much more in a doctorate level program than they may in an undergraduate or in a master's program. But each program is very different. Some programs, the university requires it for every graduate program so that the person applying to this, a specific program has to take it, but the department might not weigh it as much as other factors. Okay. When you're communicating with graduate programs, yes, you want to ask, if they're requiring the GRE, what's the average score of students that are admitted to their program? But you also want to find out what the range of scores is as well. So not just the average, but what is the range of scores of students you admitted to your program in the fall of 2020 would be a question. That gives you a lot more information about their scores and the scores that they accept. Okay. So, any questions with the GRE? Like I said, it looks like, and I'll go down the list again. I'm going to start with physical therapy, requires the GRE in most programs. Psychology and criminal justice programs are going to typically require the GRE. The good news is, I'll give the good news to the student who's interested in an accelerated nursing program first. The good news is actually the accelerated nursing program is a bachelor's level program. So you're not required to take a graduate entrance exam. If you are applying to a master's degree in nursing, then yes, it would if they're going to require exam, it's going to be the GRE. Even better news for everyone else who's interested in a master's degree in social work. Most social work programs, master's programs, do not require any standardized tests. Rutgers master's degree in social work does not require a standardized test. I know, but I'm afraid everybody's going to ditch out on my presentation now. Only social work majors. There's a few in the area. I want to say the only one I know of is maybe Bryn Mawr. Now, if you're applying right from your bachelor's degree in social work to a PhD in social work, then there may be a chance that you have to take the GRE. But if you're looking at the MSW, again, the vast majority of MSW programs do not require a standardized test. And you will find that in many of the direct service like programs. Social work is the most widely known program that most widely does not require standardized tests. I know there are a number of master's degree in counseling that don't require a standardized test, although it's not as plentiful, it's not as many. I have a master's degree in counseling. When I was admitted, a standardized test was actually required. Since then, I believe the program I went to does not require it anymore. So the social work students, yes, you can kind of breathe a sigh of relief. Now, you could be, applying to lots of different programs, and you might find that one or two require it. And if you really want to apply to them, then you're going to have to take it. Okay. So let me go back. Make sure. No questions. And I'll talk about prep and prep courses and things like that toward the end of the presentation, the PowerPoint today. Okay, so let me go to the next. Again, because it looks like if anyone has joined us after 1254, I think that was the last chat, and you want to, if you could, if anyone else has joined us and you didn't add into the chat what type of graduate program you're interested in applying to, then if you could do that now, because I do want to make sure I'm covering everyone's interest areas. So I'll give you a second. You can type while I jump to the Gmat. So the Gmat is the Graduate Management Admissions Test. And so this exam is primarily used only for students who are applying to master's degrees in business administration. So that would be the MBA. Just to let you know, you do not have to have an undergraduate degree in business to apply to an MBA program. But this is the standard test for MBA programs. And again, like the GRE, the Gmat, because of COVID, has gone online remote, so that if you're not comfortable going to a testing site, you can take the Gmat from home as well. And they do use a proctoring platform. The Gmat, again, is very similar content to the GRE general test. And it's about the same time frame, about the same content. Really, the biggest difference is that it's more in business lingo. So for a student who was an undergraduate business student, taking the Gmat, they're going to recognize a lot of the business language that's used. If you're coming from a non-business undergraduate program, certainly you can still take the Gmat, you can still do well, but you're just going to notice that there's business lingo in there that you might not have had in your English degree or your psychology degree. The other thing I want to point out is that The GMAT is, again, the most popular exam for students applying to MBA programs and some other master's degrees in business. However, I would say the last 6 or 7 years, a lot of MBA programs have started also accepting the GRE. So if you're a student who's looking at MBA programs and you are coming from a non-business undergraduate degree, if the program gives you a choice of the GMAT or the GRE, then you may want to take the GRE because it's not going to be in that business lingo. And you probably would just feel a little bit more comfortable with the language of the GRE rather than the GMAT. Again, the GMAT, like the GRE, is offered year-round. It is computerized, so if you are taking it on site, like the GRE, you go to a testing site, and to get a testing site date and time, you would register for the GRE, and then you can, the GMAT, just like the GRE, you're going to find testing sites, and there will be a calendar for each site with dates and times available for you to take it. I can tell you, again, looking at the availability and the test sites for the GMAT, not as many test sites in New Jersey for the GMAT as there were for the GRE. I think the closest one in New Jersey was Trenton and Atlantic City, the in-person test sites. But again, plenty of sites were available in Philadelphia. And if you need to take it at home, that option is available for you as well. But whether you're taking it at home or at a site, it is offered year-round. It is, again, fairly easy to register and schedule an appointment for your test within 2 or 3 weeks of taking the exam. The fee for the GMAT is $250, and you can go to mba.com and register for the GMAT. And this is the breakdown, and yes, you see it's very similar to the GRE, a little bit shorter time, 3 hours and 30 minutes, and it has the analytical, verbal, quantitative, and an integrative reasoning. The score range, it's from 400 to 600, or 2/3 of the test takers score between 400 and 600. The score is between 200 and 800 is the possibility. So the perfect score would be an 800. As it says, a score of 650 or higher would be in the 76th percentile, while score of 550 would be in the 43rd percentile. For the nation's top 10 business schools, they look for a high score, a score of 715 or above. Okay. So just like graduate programs that require the GRE, you're going to find that graduate programs requiring the GMAT have master's degrees in business administrations. It really varies what kind of score they're looking for. Definitely those more competitive top business schools are going to look for those higher scores, whereas less competitive programs may look for more of an average score. The GMAT, often with MBA programs, the nature of the programs are that most of the students in MBA programs did not go right on from undergrad into the MBA program, that they worked for a few years and then they applied to an MBA program. Your more competitive MBA schools actually require a number, usually like 5 or 6 years of post-baccalaureate work before you can even apply to those programs. So yes, the GMAT is required, but they're also looking at your undergraduate grades And they're looking at the experience that you have. So they put MBA programs put a lot of value on experience, in addition to test scores. Okay. So, I don't know, moving right along, but we have a lot to cover. Okay. So the next test is the Lsat. And the Lsat, as it says, the law school admissions test. So this is strictly for students who are applying to law school. I would recommend, if you're not applying to law school, do not take this test. It's a little bit more grueling than the GRE. Now, you might be applying to joint programs. So for example, Rutgers Law School has a joint program with Rutgers-Camden's master's degree in public administration. And in that case, you would take the Lsat exam to get your entrance into law school. That would be required. But the MPA program might not require you to take the GRE in addition. So the MPA, the Masters in Public Administration, might say, we'll just consider your Lsat scores. You don't have to take the GRE. But the law school is not going to waive the Lsat score for the GRE. There may be I don't even know if it's a handful, very few law schools in the country that will take the GRE in place of the Lsat. The majority are taking the Lsat. And because there's so few that will take the GRE, and you're going to apply to more than one graduate program, if you're going to law school, you're going to take the Lsat. I always tell students for this exam, it's not like the GRE, it's not like the Gmat, it's not like the SAT. It is definitely different than the other exams. It is 3 hours and 25 minutes. So in that respect, it is similar to the GRE and the Gmat. But the sections are different. Your sections are analytical reasoning, logical reasoning, and reading comprehension, as well as a writing sample. I'll get into that in a little bit. It is a multiple choice test, and the scores range between a 120 and a 180, with the average score being a 150. However, I really like to point out to students, you need above the average score to get into most law schools. So while the averages of test takers, what you're going to find is that there are students who will take the Lsat and then get their scores and decide they're not going to law school because of their scores, and they're not able to get higher scores. So that's the 150 is the average of test takers. And you definitely are looking at 150 or above to be a competitive applicant to law school. The fee is $200, so it's a little bit less than the other two exams. And the Law School Admissions Council is the lsac.org is where you would go to register for the exam. It is offered multiple times a year, but it is not as offered nearly as many times, or it's not as available to take as the GRE and the Gmat. One other thing I'm going to talk about the GRE and the Gmat, when you take those exams, when you're finished, the computer asks you, do you want to save your score? Do you want this to be your official score? If you say yes, then you actually get your score right there and then. It's automatically scored. Now it normally takes another 10 to 15 days to go out to the schools that you're applying to, but at least you know automatically what your score is. The other exams I'm going to talk about, you do not get your scores automatically. But the Lsat is offered multiple times a year. They've actually started to offer it more often than they used to. For 2021, there were 3 dates that have already been announced. There were January dates, February dates, and the April date. Because of COVID, they're rolling out their dates a little bit slower than they have in the past. Usually the dates are published for each academic year by the middle of the previous academic year. But for obvious reasons, they have not been able to do that this year. So again, the April date is coming up. That's already been announced. Students can register for that date. There is June date, and the rest are probable. So probably a June date, a July date, either late August or early September, October, and November dates. It is being administered in person and online at home as well, which is huge for the LSAT. It was not long ago at all that they were in person at a site, paper, pencil. Only about 2 years ago did they switch to in-person computerized. Actually, I think you use iPads or tablets. And because they had switched just a few years ago to tablets, they were actually able to then quickly transition into the at-home version. And it's called the Lsat Flex. So as it says, due to ongoing COVID pandemic, the Law School Admissions Council has been delivering the multiple choice exam in the form of Lsat Flex, which is online and remotely proctored. Okay, so again, if you are not comfortable going on site, then you can take it at home. However, there are still only a limited amount of dates that the Lsat Flex is available. So even though you're at home and it's online, you can't take it 24/7 or every day of the week or every week of the year. They still have specific dates that coincide with the dates that I have up here. So there's dates in April and likely June, July, August, September, October, November that they're going to be offered. As it says, the second part. Okay, yes, there is. Let me get to really quickly, the sections. So there, as I mentioned before, the LSAT the components are logical reasoning. So this is brief passages where you have to read, draw a conclusion, a lot of reading, a lot of writing with the LSAT exam, or a lot of reading. They do have the writing sample, but there's a lot of reading in the logic and the analytical reasoning and the reading comprehension. And so then there's reading comprehension, where you will be asked or be given 4 sections, 3 of which contain passages of 400 to 500 words in length. And you have to compare reading sections with short passages. I do want to say, if anyone's thinking of taking the LSAT, there are no legal questions. You do not have to have any legal background, any legal knowledge to apply to law school. You do not need to be a political science major or a criminal justice major. You can be any major you want to be. So don't be afraid that there's going to be legal questions on the LSAT. There is not. Once you take the bar, that's when you will have all your legal questions, but not on the LSAT. The skill areas they're looking for is really reading comprehension, analytical reasoning, logical reasoning. The analytical reasoning is what usually is the most difficult part for students because it's logic games. And this is the section that students have never seen before. There's not a lot of classes in a bachelor's program that prepare you for logic games. But the classes that, if you're thinking of going to law school, want to take the LSAT, I do tell students, take logic courses, take philosophy courses, and math. The math majors actually score the highest on the LSAT, higher than any other major. And that's because they have that logic background. Philosophy majors also score very high because of the analytical reasoning that they've been practicing as philosophy majors. Okay. And then I'll quickly go through the last couple exams. And as you can see, the Gmat, Lsat, once you get into specific professions that you're applying to, like an MBA, like law, medical, then you have the more targeted standardized tests. So the Mcat is the exam that you're going to use to apply to medical school. Again, if you're not applying to medical school and you do not need to take the Mcat, don't go near it. Physician assistant programs require the GRE, which is great. And if you have the option, take the GRE and not the Gmat and not the Mcat. They will accept Mcat scores. So there are some students who will take the Mcat, think they're going to medical school, and for whatever reason might change their mind. Physician assistant programs will take the Mcat, but if you have a choice, take the GRE, because the Mcat is grueling. The rest of them were grueling. This is like twice as grueling. It says 6+ hours. I can tell you it's closer to 7. The exam is multiple choice. It's broken up into 4 areas: physical sciences, verbal reasoning, biological sciences, and writing sample. The fee is a little bit higher, and you'll find that with everything about applying to medical school, it's a little bit higher at $320. The Mcat is paper pencil, and it is in person. They may have gone tablet, but now that I think of it, but it is still in person. Even during the pandemic, they did not go online. They basically had to cancel all their exams from February through to the middle of July. They did an amazing job at the AAMC at rescheduling the dates for this past admission cycle, so that students could still take the Mcat and apply to medical school in a timely manner. Looking at this next year coming up, I was actually just participating in a conference in January with the AAMC, and they're pretty much going back to their 2019 dates. The difference is for each day, they're really doubling up on cohorts. So instead of maybe having 50 students coming in at one time, they're breaking it up into 2 different times of the day and having 25 in the morning and 25 in the late afternoon, evening, so that they can distance basically while taking these as an exam. It is administered primarily from March to September, and there are a limited amount of test days for each of those months. March and April, I think there's 3 test days. The rest of the months through August, there may be 4, and then September, they're probably back to 3. And then there is usually 2 January dates. This year they added 3 because of the COVID cases spiking. They added another date. Mcat score, maximum is 528. If you're applying to osteopathic programs, you need a 506 or higher. Allopathic or MD programs around a 510 or higher. The Mcat you take well in advance of applying to medical school. Right now, it is February, so there's not an exam, but for students who are applying this coming summer to medical school, we tell them, and they're in their junior year. So the students applying to medical school this summer are juniors going into their senior year. They should be taking the exam between January and May of their junior year. You apply to medical school between June and early September. And then you will find out probably at the earliest November, but most students don't find out if they're admitted to medical school until February, March of their senior year. I'm working with students who have a March interview date for medical school this year. Of course, they're behind this year, but it's a very long, drawn out process. Other exams, and I won't go into too many details, but if you're dental school, you have the DAT, the American Dental Association's exam. If you're going to pharmacy school, about 50% of pharmacy schools require the Pcat. If you're interested in California pharmacy schools do not require the Pcat. In this area, it's probably a little bit higher than 50% that require the Pcat, but more and more are not requiring it. And then I don't know if this pertains to any students. Often when you're researching schools, you're going to see the Toefl being required. The Toefl is an English language test that might be required of non-English speaking international students. They may be required, in addition to the standardized tests, to also take the Toefl. So if you see that, that's what the Toefl is. Okay. And then I wanted to talk real quick about accommodations and waivers, fee waivers. So each of the testing organizations do offer accommodations for disabilities, and they also offer fee waivers for the exams. So if you're wondering, can I get a fee waiver? Every one of the organizations does offer a fee waiver. However, you have to, for both accommodations and fee waivers, you absolutely have to apply for them well in advance of taking that exam. So you might be thinking, it's February, I'm thinking of taking the February Lsat exam. Let's see if I can get a fee waiver. It's too late. Actually, I think I just had a student, we looked into this recently, and they wanted to take an LSAT that was coming up, and it was December was like the deadline for getting a fee waiver for the LSAT. So you really, if you're interested in fee waivers, you really have to plan early, and you have to apply for them months in advance of when you're going to take that test. The big reason for that is because, yes, they can give a fee waiver, but often they only have a limited amount of fee waivers that they can give. So once those fee waivers are given out, then the money is gone essentially for a fee waiver. Also, if you want accommodations, the same thing. You need to apply for accommodations well in advance of when you're going to take the exam. And for accommodations, the reasoning is because if it is an accommodation, those arrangements have to be made at the test site or with the test itself. There still may be, even though you're at home and on a computer, there still may be accommodations that are made within the test that would have to be arranged. Also know that if you're asking for a fee waiver, you will be asked to provide financial information for the fee waiver. Just like if you're applying for financial aid at Rutgers for tuition, you have to provide financial documentation. And the same with accommodations. You expect to have to provide documentation of a disability in order to be approved for an accommodation. Okay. And I will go back to the test prep because that's where I'm going to go out to our website. Some tips. Hopefully the biggest tip is research the schools that you're considering applying to. Draw up a list of schools and look at each one of them. The best thing to do is create a spreadsheet for yourself. List your schools that you're applying to, see what their requirements are, as far as the exams, so that you have a good record of what you need. And you can compare what you need with each program. So, do research, plan well ahead of time. Graduate school, unlike undergrad, Rutgers-Camden, you can apply to Rutgers, am I right, Ms. Waters? 2 weeks before classes start. You can get admitted the week classes start each semester at Rutgers-Camden, which is great, but I've said since I've been at Rutgers-Camden, it sets a really bad example for students who are considering graduate school, because that is not the timeline for going to graduate school. Most graduate programs are competitive, and you are applying, like I said, with medical school, really the process starts, almost a year and a half before you would even start medical school. Law school is probably about a year ahead of time. So you're not waiting until your senior year at Rutgers to start researching, to start taking exams. You really, want to do most of your preparation for graduate school during your junior year. Now, some programs, mostly master's programs, you can apply in the spring of your senior year. But a lot of programs, and mostly if it's a doctorate level program or some of the really competitive and MBA program, medical programs, you really have to do this application process in your, really start and be involved in it in your junior year. Another piece of advice is application deadlines. To me, they're the worst thing graduate programs can publish, because if you are applying at the deadline, you are applying late. So remember that. The deadline is late. When you do want to apply is within a month of when the applications open. You want to apply early to graduate programs, not at the deadline. So ignore the deadline and find out when do the applications open, and let me try to get my application in within a month of them opening. Most of them programs, as they get applicants, they're accepting applicants. And so the longer you wait, the fewer seats there are left. And if you're looking at graduate programs that offer any type of graduate assistantships, like teaching assistantships, research assistantships, which could mean free tuition, the application for those who are seeking assistantships is usually well in advance of their application deadlines. So always pays to apply early in the application cycle and not later. My last slide is a lot of pretty much every graduate exam we could think of. So that'll be part of this. And then just wanted to jump out real quick to our website. This is the Career Center website, cc.camden.rutgers.edu. Oh, you know what? Can you see that, Ms. Walters?
No, you have to stop sharing this and then then share the website.
Okay, got it. There we go.
There you go.
Okay. And then to find the graduate school information, don't go to grad students. That's for people in the master's and PhD programs. You want to go to students applying to graduate school. We have a lot of information in here. In particular, since we're talking about tests and test prep, we do have links on our website. And then we listed some of the local test prep organizations. As far as test prep, again, it depends on what exam you're taking. You can either do self-study where you're buying books and studying yourself, or you can get a tutor, or you can take courses. And so these are some of the courses that we've listed here. The first place I would say to start with any of these exams is on the exam organization's website. GRE has a power prep that you can download that's really good with practice exams. The Gmat has the same. The Lsat also has a lot of really good resources on their website. So start there first and then work out from there. Really decide, know what scores you're looking for, take practice tests to see what your baseline is, and then decide, do I feel like I can study on my own? Do I think I need a prep course. It's really a very individualized decision based on, you know, what works the best for you. And again, if you need other information or really just need a one-on-one, I encourage you to make an appointment. To make an appointment, you just go into Handshake and go to the Career Center tab in Handshake, and you can schedule an appointment with a staff member to help you with if you need any other help. Any questions? Back to the chat.
All right, if you can stop sharing, then we can go back to all the students. There we go. Perfect. Wow, I'm overwhelmed.
It's a lot. I
I'm
know.
still back like, whoa. It can be very overwhelming.
Yes.
Just say, I hope you took a lot of notes, but take a deep breath.
I will share the PowerPoint.
Yes, and so we'll put it on Canvas, which is where Randy usually puts the PowerPoints that we use. You know, you thought you got a lot of information. You know, if you have any questions, please ask. If not, you know, Ms. Holman is very readily available. She gave you her information. You know, think it through and then jot down your questions and schedule an appointment with Ms. Holman. That would be my suggestion. Does anyone have any questions at this moment? Please unmute yourselves and ask.
Say goodbye. No.
There's one in the chat, Ms. Holman.
Mm-hmm.
Can I find information regarding praxis for education majors on Handshake tab?
Let me see if we have the praxis information here. So we don't have any graduate information on Handshake. It's on our website. I don't have the praxis, mostly because the praxis is typically not required for graduate programs. It is required, you're taking the praxis for teacher certification.
Yeah, our graduate program on campus requires it.
Right, because you're looking at the teacher certification program.
They require it. Some of our students have been required to take it.
Mm-hmm. So you can go right to, I believe ETS also administers the praxis. Now, let me. Yes, so if you go to ets.org, you're going to find the praxis information there.
Great, awesome. Are there any other questions? Okay, she said thank you. Are there any other questions? Hey, Ms. Holman, any last words for our students?
Prepare.
Prepare,
Don't wing
prepare,
it.
prepare.
Don't wing it.
Yes, absolutely.
Take it as seriously as you took the SAT or the ACT.
Exactly. Okay, well, thank you, Ms. Holman. Thank you as usual so much for availing yourself to present to our students. We're gonna have the PowerPoint and the video on our EOF YouTube page and the PowerPoint on Canvas by tomorrow. But if you have any questions, please reach out to Ms. Holman. Great, thank you so much again. And I'll see you at the next one.
Thank you, Ms. Holman.
Okay, you're welcome.